Oh, hello there. Didn't see you there. It's been a while since we last saw each other. As you know, life has many doors, and the doors I took me far away from YouTube. And that's okay, because I'm back. At least for this video. Maybe more. I don't know. But in the meantime, my name is Matt, and I'll be your GM for the day. Today, I want to talk about writing, specifically story writing. In today's video, I am going to be talking about the writing style of Pathfinder versus 5th edition. Before we get started, allow me to clarify. This video is not to give judgment on the mechanical side of either system. It's only meant to look at the story structure of the campaigns that are created by Wizards of the Coast and Paizo. So before jumping into things, I am going to analyze these companies from their shared roots. D&D 1st edition, 2nd edition, and 3.5 are the kind of shared perspectives that Wizards of the Coast and Pathfinder share. Basically, when Wizards of the Coast was moving on to D&D 4th edition, Pathfinder split away and continued with a 3.5 edition. But, again, we're not worried about mechanics, we're only worried about the story. So what is the story structure of those early editions? A lot of the early adventures that were created, and especially if you look through Dungeon Magazine as a kind of viewpoint into 2nd edition, most of what was made was dungeon crawls, which is a narrative form. So dungeon crawls are the basis of storytelling for that version. And they worked, because with dungeon crawls, you don't have to create a full adventure or full story. All you have to do is create a dungeon and then fill it up with subtext. Rather than telling you exactly what's going on, there are clues that the adventurers can stumble upon, and then the players can create the narrative themselves. If the players come across a vial of blue goo, and then in the next room they come across a bunch of blue orcs, the players go, oh my god, that blue goo probably has something to do with those blue orcs. So yeah, they didn't have to write out a story because the entire story was discovery. Now, however, that writing form has kind of fallen off. There are still dungeon crawls, mind you, but they aren't as popular anymore because 5e has kind of shifted the focus from the mechanics side to more of a role-playing story side. And it got big, and now that's what people want. The other form of writing style that was commonly used was a linear narrative. So, to put it in perspective, during the time that I was gone, I learned playwriting. And in playwriting, we learn this thing. In fact, you've probably seen this thing a number of times throughout your education. It's called a Freytag's Pyramid, and basically it is the basics of narrative storytelling. It has the idea of there's a beginning, a middle, and end, or to be more precise, there's an intro, a rising action, a climax, a falling action, and then a denouement. And this is very common throughout a lot of D&D adventures, except instead of an introduction, there is character creation. Whoever the characters are, that's their introduction. They are introduced into the adventure, typically during a rising action. They then travel through the adventure until they reach the climax, and then there's like a section that says what happens after, and that's your falling action and denouement. So yeah, those are the two bases of storytelling that earlier editions of D&D would use. And linear storytelling is still pretty common with a lot of adventures now. However, Wizards of the Coast and Pathfinder have kind of developed their own format of adventures. Let me get into that in a moment. I'm going to bore you with a quick lesson on Aristotle. Aristotle is a Greek guy, and basically he created this idea of theater, where theater has 6 core elements. The 6 core elements are, and allow me to check this to make sure I'm not fucking up. Aristotle's 6 elements of theater go as thus. There's plot, the entire story of the play. Character, which is the characters within the play. Theme, which is theme. It's the kind of narrative idea that you are weaving into the actual story of the play. Language, which, I'm not gonna lie, I never really truly grasped language. Language, which is basically like the kind of words that are used. It kind of ties closely into character, if I'm being truly honest. The way that someone speaks creates a different vibe for a play. Anyway, next up is rhythm or song. Greek plays kind of had like a chorus with all of their stuff, and that's where it comes from. And then finally is spectacle. And spectacle is an interesting one because with modern day storytelling, spectacle has moved so high up. And now rhythm has also kind of joined that, where now rhythm is not just like the chorus, it actually is music, which is why it's rhythm / song, because now music is an important part of the 6 elements. So yeah, those are Aristotle's 6 elements. And the reason I go into those is because they're going to help us a little bit when we start decoding Pathfinder and Wizards of the Coast writing style. Pathfinder is interesting. Rather than having a buy one book, get one big adventure, they use a subscription service where you buy the adventure in parts. So you pay like $15 a month and they have 6 parts to this adventure. So at the end of the day, you're paying $90 for the full thing. But if you want to bail out early because it's not quite vibing with you, you can do that. And that's awesome. Thank you, Pathfinder, for doing things like that. But it changes how they have to deliver their narrative. Because you are buying the adventure in parts, they have to deliver it in a different way. Basically, every part has to be its own adventure, because otherwise you're being screwed out of an adventure. It's like, imagine if you were paying for the demo for a video game. You'd be like, I don't really want to do that. And so Paizo doesn't do that. They go, hey, here's $15, we guarantee you an adventure as well as all this extra content. They dedicate about 50 pages to the adventure, and the other 50 pages are for just stuff. Lore, monsters, items, alternative game mechanics, things like that. It's really neat. Really like this setup. This means that the way that they write their adventures is altered because they have an overall narrative. Typically, they introduce either between the pages or up front the big bad of the adventure, but the first set is never about taking on that big bad. The first, second, even third adventures are kind of away from that. The big bad is meant to be saved for the 6th adventure. And so the Freytag pyramid for this looks a bit different. It looks like this. Just like any other linear narrative, there's still an introduction during the rising action. However, the rising action is spiked. It has to have its own climax in each and every one of the narratives until there is the actual climax for the full campaign, the full adventure path. And ultimately, I think this works. This is a perfectly fine way of delivering an adventure. It's just they are delivering it in a way that works with a subscription basis.
Hello everyone, sorry about the post-edit audio. I realized in the edit that I had made just a stupid argument against Pathfinder's storytelling structure and decided it was best to just delete that and instead replace it with this. And mind you, I've only really been a player for Pathfinder First Edition. I GM'd some Pathfinder Second Edition adventures, but have never actually run through a full one. And the only reason why I have never ran a full one was because basically during its third spike had a big enough change to where the players lost interest. Like, it was absolutely connected to the story as a whole, but the story being told on that specific spike was just not to their interest, and so we ended up dropping that game. I know for a fact that that is more of an anomaly than anything, but that is one of the few problems I've had with Pathfinder Adventure Paths. Past that, the linear 6-spike structure that they have is really solid. It works very well.
So let's move on to D&D 5th Edition, which, mind you, I have a lot more experience with D&D 5th Edition than Pathfinder. D&D 5th Edition is interesting. 5th Edition has its own narrative structure. If you look at Tyranny of Dragons, which was written by Kobold Press, it's different because that story is still a linear story. It has a beginning, a middle, an end, and a climax, and all that. After that adventure, however, it changes, and I think I know why it changed. And mind you, I don't have any proof of this. This is all conjecture, but I think I know where they're coming from and how they decide to design it. You see, in 2011, a very important game came out. You probably heard of it. It's called Skyrim. And basically, 5th edition, I think, looked at Skyrim and went, we should mimic that. Which is not the first time Wizards of the Coast has done this. D&D 4th edition was infamous because it was trying to mimic MMORPGs, Memorpigas, which now those have fallen off and so they've moved on. Skyrim, however, was this next big thing. It was this open world sandbox that you could explore and find story. And I believe that that was the basis for 5th edition, which, mind you, 5th edition declared that it was being worked on in 2012. So it's not too far-fetched. And if you look at 5th edition modules, there is a lot that are open world sandboxes in small places with a lot to explore. So it's almost like a mixture of classic... what did I call it before? Of classic dungeon crawl narrative and linear storytelling, where they bash those two things together and the story's somewhere. It's just up to the players to find it.
Which, this is the primary issue that almost every person has with GMing for D&D 5th edition. Because this narrative structure is just a bunch of pieces put in front of the board, it is up to the GM to make sense out of them and to guide the players toward the story. This means that you get a range of quality with your story structure. You either get an amazing GM who is able to take these pieces and create an amazing story out of it, or you end up with someone who doesn't know what to do with these pieces and you get something subpar. Ultimately, this narrative structure places a lot of pressure on the GM to make it work.
Anyway, let's move on to the Aristotelian 6 elements, because those have a major place in how these two work their systems. Because we've established how they tell their stories, but where do they put their weight? And what I have found with D&D 5th edition is it is very safe. It's a very safe system. They put plot first, and while there is kind of some cool stuff sprinkled here and there, for the most part, they aren't willing to take risks. Basically, they create their story, and it's very much the same as it was the last. Yes, there's a story there, and again, plot is the number one element of Aristotelian story structure because it is the most engaging. Plot tells the people, like, hey, here's a story, and people go, story time, I love it. So it works. Paizo's storytelling structure puts spectacle a little more toward the front. If you look at Paizo's Pathfinder Society and 5e's Adventure League, you'll see a big difference between the two. Pathfinder takes a lot more risks with their stuff in order to tell something cool, to create a really just awesome idea, and then they'll create rules for it and will throw it at the players, and the players are terrified because they don't know this thing. 5th edition is more like, hey, here's a story. And it's in their Adventure League that they tell a linear story. It starts here, ends here. And they're very safe. They are very safe stories of just like, here's an adventure. Pathfinder will be like, you ever wonder what it would be like to have a spider queen that's now undead? Well, here you go. That's cool. So yeah, Pathfinder creates just a whole bunch of spectacle. They put spectacle more at the forefront for a lot of their adventures, which probably because, as I said before, they have all of these different spikes for their stories. And for their structure to work, they have to keep bringing players and GMs back with something interesting and cool to look at. If each one of these spikes has just a narrative adventure that is about telling the story, then there is a likelihood of people getting bored. So in order to avoid that, they focus hardcore on the spectacle and introduce something new or cool or exciting with each and every one. And they are able to do this because each and every one of their adventure paths has a climax. And that climax they are able to lean into in order to help bring people back and tell their story. So in terms of modern day Paizo versus Wizards of the Coast writing style, I don't think one is inherently better than the other. The spectacle that is the exploration mechanic for 5th edition can be the thing that drives a lot of people in. But I think if I just wanted to tell a really fun or cool story, I would probably lean more toward Paizo to tell something unique. Because that's the biggest thing you're going to get with Pathfinder. You're going to get very unique ideas and very unique stories. Now, if you can stomach trying to work with that system, which was something I could never really do, great. If not, take the story, make it your own. Once you have it, you can do whatever you want with it. If you're a 5th edition GM and you're like, I don't want to run Pathfinder, feel free to just go buy them and then, do what you always do and just make up bullshit rules and convert it. You and I both know you're not converting it. You're just making it up on the spot. Make it up on the spot as you go along and tell some of those stories because they're cool and they're fun and I fucking love them. Anyway, I'm happy to be back, even if it's only for this one video. I don't know. I've already been looking at some other stuff to like tell stories about. Next video is probably going to be Vaesen. I'm probably going to tell you about Vaesen and whether you should buy it or not. Anyway, have a good one, you all. Stay safe, stay dry, and get out of my room.
Actually, hold on one moment. First off, I just wanted to thank you for sticking around for this mess of a video. Second, I have not forgotten my agreement with you and have put in the work in order to bring you something with this video. I realized that one of the biggest issues that I had as to why I did not want to create YouTube videos was I was creating too big of projects. However, I am more than willing to create a bunch of small projects to go along with each of my videos. So, here is today's project. 5th edition GMs, I think we can all agree that the CR30 creatures for 5th edition are, well, non-existent. And since this is a bit of a crossover video, I figure I will do the taboo and we'll do some conversions from Pathfinder 5th edition. Sorry to say, Pathfinder, I don't have enough experience with your system in order to go the other way around, but at the same time, you have all of your bases covered with your amazing bestiary. 5th edition, however, could use some more solid CR30 creatures, so I have taken a few of Pathfinder CR30 creatures and converted them in order to be used for 5th edition. Here's hoping you have fun with them. Try not to kill your players. Until next time. Bye.